Evacuate now!
Watch the evening news and look into the faces of average Americans struggling with disasters that have brought their communities to its knees. See their struggles, their pain, their fears, and know that no one is immune from these disasters. It is but by the grace of God that it's not you and your families in these struggles. When disaster strikes a community in our nation, our first responders spring into action without hesitation. What is often overlooked is that they too are victims of the disaster. It is these everyday first responders that are called into action to bring safety, security, and peace to chaotic situations. What also is often overlooked is that their own family challenges and damaged property distracts them from that public safety mission. That is where the National Fraternal Order Police steps in. Volunteers with the FOP Disaster Area Response Team, also known as DART, provide hot meals and remediation work for first responders' homes so that they can stay on the job and focus on stabilizing their communities. Today, we're joined by Jason Smith, chairman of the National FOP DART Committee, to talk about the FOP's commitment to support first responders in communities ravaged by natural and man-made disasters. We're also joined by Rob Pride, chairman of the National FOP Board of Trustees, and Shawn Helbig, the Kentucky FOP National Trustee, to discuss our response to their communities during their time of need. I'm Patrick Yoes, National President of Fraternal Order Police, and this is The Blue View. Rob, let's start with you. A little bit of your background.
I've been a law enforcement officer here in Colorado for the last 30 years, born and raised. Started my career as a reserve deputy with the Weld County Sheriff's Department, and then got my first hired job with the Louisville, Colorado Police Department, which we're going to talk about a little bit today. And then for the last 24 years, I've been working for the Loveland, Colorado Police Department in northern Colorado, about 50 miles north of Denver. And currently serve as a patrol sergeant for day shift for the best daying crew in law enforcement, I might say. Got a good troop, and that's my law enforcement history. Been a member of FOP since 1998 when I went to work with the Louisville Police Department, and still continue to be a very proud member and involved as much as I can.
That's awesome. Shawn, how about you?
I started my career in the late 90s for a little small town called Russellville, Kentucky. It's a little 6,000 person town. I was there for about a year. Then I moved over to the city of Bowling Green, where I spent the next 19 years. Bowling Green's the third largest town in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I retired back in 2018, and I've been a detective for my county attorney's office since then. And I've been an FOP member since day one, and will continue to do so. So I serve now as National Trustee for the Kentucky State FOP, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's great. Thanks. And then Jason.
Yeah, I'm a 25-year police officer in Oklahoma. Started way back in the mid-90s. Served in many roles as a police officer. And retired just this last March as the chief of police in Jenks, Oklahoma. I've been an FOP member since the beginning, served proudly on the executive board of the Oklahoma State Fraternal Order Police for about 16 years. And I'm the immediate past president of the state lodge, and have served on the state DART team since 2011. And really, with what we're talking about here today, it's just been I found my niche in life, and that's disaster relief.
Well, great. All of you, just great leaders at FOP, and I think it just illustrates where we are as an organization and the diversity we have. Just so many solid law enforcement officers making a difference in our communities. Jason, I'm gonna stay with you for a little bit. The disaster relief is kind of a labor of love for a lot of people. They have a lot of motivations that get us into this area, and you have a very interesting path that brought you to disaster relief. So if you could talk a little bit about just the path that brought you into being chairman of this committee.
Sure. Seeing what you went through and your agency in 2005 with Hurricane Katrina, we identified that the boots on the ground law enforcement officers, our brothers and sisters, were not being taken care of. And so under the leadership of Ron Bartmeyer in the state of Oklahoma and the Oklahoma board, we developed a regional disaster relief response team which involved enclosed trailer, several cookers, and we kind of evolved from there. Our first deployment was in 2011 with the Joplin tornadoes that devastated that community with an F5 tornado, killing hundreds and hundreds of people. And we were able to provide real relief and work for the men and women in blue and make sure they were taken care of. When we got there, they were handing out cold sandwiches and eating MREs, and we made sure they had 4 hot meals a day. We worked around the clock and really satisfied that need and started a fire that led to the model of our national model and our national DART team to take care of our members.
Yeah, Jason, I have to tell you, just being on the receiving end of disaster relief services through the FOP, there's a lot to be said about having a hot meal, and most people don't think much of it, but just that hot meal, and knowing that it came from their peers and someone to talk to while doing it. Just I can't speak enough of what it does for morale. But in addition to that, also the growth of our disaster response. A lot of people don't recognize, they don't realize, they don't take the time to realize that when a community is struggling because of a natural disaster or even man-made disaster, an accident or something, the people who are affected are the people who live in that community. Well, law enforcement officers live in those communities as well, and they're victims as well. The question is how can someone stabilize a community when they themselves are victims and concerned about their own future as well? So if talk a little bit about the development of this of our disaster response and the role it plays in trying to help mitigate damage to homes of first responders as well.
You bet. Like you stated, the meals are one thing. The fellowship is a good thing. But what we did realize really through your leadership is that those officers' homes, they have trees in their front yards, and they have trees in their living rooms, and their cars are buried under rubble. And there's no one to help them. They can't stay home. They don't have that option. They're working 12, 14, sometimes 16-hour shifts to stabilize the community. So in partnership with Lowe's, we teamed up and purchased 3 remediation trailers that are stocked full of saws and tools and screws and tarps and everything that we need to go to those officers' homes and get their families taken care of so that they can concentrate on stabilizing their communities and being safe on their jobs. A distracted police officer is the most dangerous thing, the dangerous part of our jobs as police officers. And so we want to take that stress off them and provide that service so that they can concentrate on what they're doing. And it's hard work. Hurricanes happen in the hottest part of the summer, and Louisiana is the hottest place on planet Earth. But our men and women that volunteer for these remediation teams are selfless, and they're relentless about getting out no matter what and taking care of these officers' homes. And they've made a real difference on the deployments that we've gone to in helping them stabilize their homes. The looks on these officers' faces, the looks on their families' faces when they talk to us after we've done that is so overwhelming for all of us. It's always an emotional time. There's always tears, and they cannot be appreciative enough. And that's what makes all this hard work worth it.
Yeah, it's and watching from my standpoint in Louisiana, we finished our national conference last year, and just weeks later, watching our equipment be deployed to Louisiana, I can speak firsthand of the hard work and dedication of so many volunteers from across the country that responded in order to be able to fill that need for us. Probably our longest deployment to date, lasting almost 3 weeks at multiple locations. Area was devastated pretty bad. I know firsthand the efforts that go into it. Some 90 homes were remediated, just taking debris, patching roofs, doing whatever we can to stabilize homes, and feeding people thousands of meals a day. Could you talk a little bit about what our assets are? What equipment do we have when we deploy? What are we bringing? What roles are we filling?
Well, we have what I call a fleet of trailers. Some trailers are provided by states that have disaster relief programs, but the National FOP DART team has a very handsome collection of equipment. along with the 3 remediation trailers that are wrapped with Lowe's logos and the disaster relief template that identifies us as the Fraternal Order of Police. We have what we call a bunkhouse trailer, which is a supply trailer that was donated by Utah that turns into usually my bedroom and several other people's bedroom, but it hauls all the equipment that we're going to need to get down there. That trailer accompanies a kitchen trailer that's a 26-foot kitchen trailer that California generously donated to the program, that has a full commercial kitchen in it and produces thousands and thousands of meals a day effortlessly. And it is an amazing piece of equipment. It's self-sufficient. It has its own generator, its own water on board. And so when we pull up to a scene, we're ready to take care of that community. We have French fryers, flat grills, ovens, stove tops, and prep areas all packed into that trailer. It's an amazing piece of equipment. We also have our crown jewel, 53-foot NASCAR style car hauler. And we call it that because in NASCAR, they have all the tools and equipment on the bottom, and then they use the top for storage of their cars. We have that, and we converted that into a larger commercial kitchen that we use on these deployments. And it gives us an office space up in the fifth wheel area of the 53-foot hauler. And it has a 53-foot awning that comes out and allows us to set up tables and where officers can come in and be fed and sit and relax. And it's really the crown jewel of our team program, and we're certainly proud of it. It's wrapped also with our beautifully themed Fraternal Order of Police, and it's also identifies some of our key sponsors that have made this mission and this vision possible. Because without the partners' donations, we just simply wouldn't have the money in our organization to take on this big of a task. But because of those amazing partnerships and those amazing donations, we're able to build and staff that equipment.
Thank you, Jason. And you're so right. This whole mission, this whole idea, this concept was, kind of evolved out of a number of responses collectively by states who had their own disaster response, and always asking a question: why can't we make a more profound response on a larger scale? And it all started with a conversation one day with a guy by the name of Jim Franzoni with SF&C Insurance, who said, I want to be part of that, and helped us find sponsors. So none of this would be possible, and it's all completely funded by the generosity of corporate America, who sees it and recognizes the sacrifice of first responders, and recognizing that our response to help those first responders are so vitally important, and stabilizing the community. So you have to mention, you mentioned the larger trailer, the 53-foot trailer. Our partnership with UPS has that trailer delivered to disaster sites for us. SF&C, Aetna Insurance, AT&T FirstNet, CVS are all corporate sponsors, all of which have basically contributed to allow us to continue to respond. And we've had a number of responses just in the last 2 years. We probably 6 or so responses to the major disasters. Most recent, I spoke already about Hurricane Ida at the coast of Louisiana and the impact it had on us, and the amount of time deployed there over multiple locations, and how many people we helped. But we also responded to a couple of other events that in recent months. And so with that, Shawn, let's I think all of us watched just before Christmas. Everybody's planning their Christmas holidays and preparations, and enjoying time with their family, and then a series of tornadoes across this country and created havoc in multiple states and caused many lives. Disaster response went to Kentucky and played a good role in feeding first responders in that location. And Shawn, that I know your own community was struck as well and impacted. And could you talk a little bit about your experience with that day when just before Christmas, when the tornadoes passed through Kentucky, and the damage it did, and how we were able to respond and help out.
Right. Pat, nobody wants to be part of a disaster, but you surely don't want to be part of a disaster 2 weeks before Christmas. In law enforcement, a lot of guys will save up vacation time so they can take off during the holidays and be with their family. And then something like this occurs, clear your schedule, because all you're doing is your job for the foreseeable future. Here in Kentucky, we lost over 75 people during this tornado outbreak. In my community of Bowling Green, which is in South Central Kentucky, we lost 17. But where I said before, we're the third largest city in the state. So if you got off the interstate, you didn't even know we had a tornado here. Now you go 2.5 hours west to the little town of Mayfield that's less than 10,000 people, and the entire town's gone. And I'm not kidding when I say it's gone. Their water tower, their main drinking water tower, wiped off the face of the earth. Their downtown area, all their government buildings, their downtown shopping, their businesses, any electricity, their wastewater plant was destroyed. And I don't know how you do that for a building that's underground and it gets destroyed. It was devastating for them. And, in that kind of community, everybody knows everybody else. And you wear lots of different hats. There's lots of different officers. They may be a deputy sheriff, but they're also the head of the Kiwanis Club, or they're the leader in their church. Well, they know everybody in the community. And so when you lose people in a community like that, you're losing family. We lost one family member from the law enforcement community in the city of Mayfield. They have a candle factory, and they were packed full of employees during that candle factory. Some of those employees were jail inmates that were out on work release that were being supervised by a deputy. And that deputy lost his life when the candle factory collapsed during the tornadoes. So it's really hard for those communities, for sure, especially the smaller communities, the ones that know everybody. So the day that happened, we had actually had a planned state meeting up in Lexington. I got up in the morning. For me to get to Lexington in time for the meeting, I leave it before the sun comes up. And so I couldn't see the devastation. But as I'm starting to drive, I'm getting calls. Hey, this has happened. This has happened. We need this. We need that. So as I'm driving to Lexington, I'm making calls to the National DART guys, Jason and yourself, Pat. And I got to say, the one great thing about our program is there's not a lot of hoops to jump through. When you need help, you say, I need help. And the answer is yes. And that's what we experienced here in Kentucky. Before I even really got 2 hours away to Lexington, I had a yes, and they were on the way. And that's what's really important to us.
Yeah, it's if you could, you've been on both sides of this. You've responded and helped during Hurricane Ida, and then you months later find yourself in your own state. Now being on the receiving end of it. Can you talk a little bit about, as a law enforcement officer, what it's like, what your members felt like to see the disaster response show up and provide the services that they did?
Well, I'll tell you, when I first got over to Mayfield, it was less than 30 hours after it occurred when we got set up. And I walked into the area where it was a farm extension office, is where all the law enforcement agencies were having their briefings. And you walk into that, and I stood in the back during their colonel was giving a briefing to all their troops. And he said, okay, just so you know, for the foreseeable future, we're on 12-hour shifts with no days off. I will do my best to get you a day off in January. And that is a deflating moment for you going into the holidays, knowing that for the next 30 to 45 days, you're working 12-hour shifts with no breaks. And these guys were so overwhelmed in Mayfield. They're pulling out family members. They're pulling out neighbors from the debris. It's overwhelming. In law enforcement, we train, but there's never any true context of what these disasters do to you. And it gets overwhelming very, very fast. And if I can, I'll read a small excerpt from a letter that was written to us from the president of the FOP in Mayfield, who is also a captain with their volunteer fire department, who also does things for their jail as well. So I'll tell you, when I said earlier, they wear all kinds of hats, they do. And this gentleman's name's Joseph Seidel. He's a great guy, dedicated to his community. He said, Shawn informed me the FOP would be deploying a food trailer and asking if we needed any other help. He reached out and was coordinating help when even we didn't even realize what it was before us. Shawn also talked to my wife, and she and I agreed something about talking with him gave us both a sense of relief and support that helped us keep going when it felt like it was too big for us to handle. Yeah. And that's what the DART program does. You spend the first 48 hours over your head in this disaster, and you think, I'm by myself. I have no help. This is all we have. And then the DART program comes in, and we had people from Indiana, Ohio, all the way in from Utah, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee. And these are officers or retired officers that come in and let these local officers know, hey, you're not alone. We're here to support you. We got your back. You worry about your job. We'll take care of feeding you. We'll take care of working on your family's house. We'll help your community. And it's a relief for them to know, hey, I don't have to carry it all by myself anymore.
Yeah. And I tell you, being on the receiving end, I know those are true words. Something very therapeutic about on both sides of this issue, those who are giving and those who are receiving. And I've been on both sides of it. You know, Rob, not long after this, we finished the Christmas holiday. Everybody's making plans for their New Year's celebration, and fires started in Colorado. Can you just kind of paint the picture to what that day was like and how it unfolded?
Yeah, it was a crazy day for us. I can tell you, when the fire started, being a native Coloradoan, we've experienced wildfires before, but they're usually up in our mountainous regions. Certainly we've had some devastating fires as of recent, where we've lost homes and luckily not a lot of fatalities in those, but never down around the Front Range area. That's just not something we think about down here. We always know as Coloradans, if you live in a mountainous community, especially in the summertime when it's dry, that's always a risk. But this fire started kind of down along the Front Range area called El Dorado Springs in Boulder County. And they're still investigating the source of that fire. There's a lot of speculation as to how that happened. But I can tell you when it first started, it was really kind of no big deal. I mean, there were some news flashes about it. It kind of started out in the middle of nowhere a little bit. But what was unprecedented about that day was as pretty soon after the fire started or right before, we had a wind event come through. And throughout this fire, the winds were sustained at 120 miles an hour. And I can tell you, I've gone down. I've had the opportunity to work down there since the fire, helping out. And I drove that fire path, and it was unbelievable what that fire did. I mean, it leaped off of a ridge, and the winds carried it clear across what I can only describe as kind of a small valley into the backside of a neighborhood in Superior. And that's when it started catching homes on fire and going from there. So very quickly, I think the fire started around 11:30 in the morning, and we were all just kind of, monitoring it, no big deal. But even up north here, I'm about 50 miles north of that fire. It was very clear about 2 hours into it that it was a serious fire, because you could see it from clear up here, and we were getting smoke and ashes up here. So by the end of that day, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, the fire had died, but had taken almost 1,000 homes in the Louisville, Superior, and Boulder County area. Having worked in Louisville, I can tell you that a wildfire is not the natural disaster that I would have ever thought in a million years would affect that area. maybe a tornado, maybe some sort of major snow event or other weather event, but not that. So it was clear very early on that they were going to need help down there. They had their hands full. And as you said earlier, Pat, this is the thing about these events is that you have officers that are out working, evacuating people, saving lives, while their own homes in this particular event are burning to the ground, and they're trying to call their own families and tell them, hey, you got to get out. This thing's coming. So it's a unique dynamic for our police officers, our members, and first responders as a whole. But as the fire started to die a little bit, our members at the Boulder County Lodge 65 called pretty quickly and said, hey, we're going to need some help here. We've got our hands full. And to Shawn and Jason's point, that was the beautiful thing about this, is that I called my state president, Steve Schultz, got his blessing. I made one call to our national president, Pat Yoes, and Jason and the boys from the DART squad were on the road in less than 24 hours, heading out here, giving up their New Year's Eve with their families to come out here and assist us and be with us. When they arrived, I have to tell you, the Boulder County folks were just overwhelmed to see them here. The Boulder County Lodge is it's a fairly new lodge, but it's a growing lodge. It's been established for a couple of years, but they just didn't know what to expect. And when Jason and his crew rolled in with that trailer set up and just started cooking, it was pretty unbelievable. Steve Schultz and I went down there before the trailer got here, scouted things out, and I can tell you what our members and what those officers were eating. They were eating cold Subway, cold Chick-fil-A. They might get a power bar or two. When meals were getting catered in or delivered hot, they weren't making their way out to the troops on the front lines while they were hot. And so, I think the command post was doing their best, but there was definitely need for us. And so we set up down there, and it was a unique perspective from me, Pat, from this particular standpoint. I've served as the national chairman of trustees now since 2017. I was blessed to be elected in that position, and I've been on the national board as the trustee for my own state since 2013. And I have sat in many, many board meetings and other meetings and listened to the fantastic work that our national DART team does, responding to Louisiana, Kentucky, all the other disaster areas that we've had during my time on the board. And it's fantastic. I mean, when you sit in those meetings and you listen to the work these guys do and the volunteers that come from everywhere to not only serve meals to our members, but to mitigate, to help remediate their houses while they're working. It's always a good feeling. And but I will tell you firsthand, it is different. It is different when it is your members, when it is officers that you've worked beside and been in this profession in your own state for years, who are standing in front of you, in front of that disaster relief trailer with some hot pastalaya or some hot burgers or something in their hands, tearing up, saying, thank you. We cannot believe you guys came. This is the first hot meal I've had on shift since this thing started. When you have officers who are impacted by this fire, whether that was a total loss or a displacement, and they're standing in front of you telling you, man, this is the best thing that's happened to me in the last 2 or 3 days. Like, thank you guys so much for being here. It is different. It's different experiencing it firsthand than when you hear those stories. And I just can't say enough about this program through the National FOP Foundation. I can't say enough about the DART guys who gave up their time with their families and came from Oklahoma, Utah, and Texas at a moment's notice to come here to help us in our moment of need. And I have to tell you, Pat, it was unprecedented from talking to Jason and the guys, because they did such a fantastic job in the way they set up and the way they were doing it that the command post here kind of integrated them into feeding everybody. I mean, these guys literally overnight turned from an FOP disaster response trailer for our members to a Type 1 food catering truck. And these guys pumped out, on average, 600 to 800 meals per meal 3 times a day, because they ended up feeding our members, police officers. They ended up feeding firefighters. They ended up feeding wildland guys. They ended up feeding the XL Energy guys who were in the parking lot next to us and smelled that cooking and came over wanting food. And I have to tell you, Jason and his crew never once turned anybody down that wanted food. If you showed up at that trailer, didn't matter who you were, no questions asked, you were getting food. And I have to tell you, and I want to share with those watching, that not only experiencing the response, but being able to be a part of that. If there's members out there that are looking for a way to give back, that are looking for a volunteer opportunity, man, this is it. If you can ever respond to one of these call outs, it is the most rewarding feeling when you're in that trailer, cooking food, handing out food, or getting people what they need, or helping in any way. It really is a rewarding experience. And again, I will just say again, having worked in Louisville at the beginning of my career, driving down there and seeing the devastation. I mean, it's literally like a bomb went off down there. It is a different experience than sitting in a meeting hearing about it. When you have those members standing in front of you with what Jason described, those looks on their face, the tears in their eyes, saying thank you for nothing more than a hot dog and some fries and a cold beverage. There's nothing like it. It was a very unique experience for us. We'll never forget it, and Colorado will forever be in the debt of the DART team and the National FOP Foundation. So thank you all.
Yeah, being on the receiving end, I don't think I could have summed it up any better. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I can tell you that I know that our law enforcement officers, a meal is a meal. But if you're not in law enforcement and you've never worked a disaster, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around it, just the demands that are placed on every individual of an agency, and everything. A hot meal might seem like it's natural and you're going to get it anyway. That's not really the case in a disaster. I can tell you from experience. If you're working these locations, last thing there's so many demands going on. Feeding the troops is really not one of them. One of the priorities, because there were so many other things that vie for your attention, a leadership role. So filling, giving that nourishment, but not only the nourishment of just food, but the nourishment of peers, being able to talk with their peers, it definitely has a huge impact on the people on the receiving end and the giving end as well. And the deployment in Colorado was a little different. This one we were actually set up right at the door. Anyone going into the command post was walking right past us. They were picking up a meal, for all of their meals. It created probably our largest, response. Jason, I think it was 850 meals a day we were doing for each meal. So that's 3 meals a day, and just to prep it and logistics, but also let Jason brag a little bit. It's not just a meal. I know they take a lot of pride in the things that they cook, and so Jason, talk a little bit about a typical deployment and how we, what's on the menu. What do we feed our, those people during our deployments?
At the beginning of all this, it was a simple hamburger and hot dog and a cold pop, and that was kind of our staple, with some chips or whatever we could manage to scrounge up. It has evolved into almost a competition. We have some great cooks that are members from around the country. Ron LeBerrier from New Orleans has single-handedly taught me how to Cajun cook, and I was already kind of a smoker, and so really whatever we can get our hands on, we're going to try to do something different for our members and the people we're feeding every single day. In Thibodaux, Louisiana, a grocery store lost refrigeration, so we got like 15 pork butts and 12 briskets, and so we fired up smokers and we smoked meat almost every day. We bought part of our arsenal of cooking utensils is a large cooking pot, Cajun, and we've done all kinds of neat things in that, from chili con carne to spaghetti to pasta laya, and really just everything in between. And part of the benefit of this amazing program is the dedicated volunteers that come from all over the country, but they come from all over the country with their own recipes and their own specialties that they cook at. So our variety of utensils that we use to cook, we utilize that, and we get them the things they need to make that special recipe that they have in their family arsenal. And we really pride ourselves in putting out some good food. And obviously, by looking at me, you can tell I eat a lot. So we eat everything that we cook, and we're real proud when people gobble it up. We did in Colorado the largest cook I've ever done with pastelaia, which was 14 batches, which filled a 30-gallon pot to the very tippy top rim. And I got to tell you, I was a little concerned with that much food that we were going to have a bunch left over. And by the time we got done serving dinner, there wasn't a noodle left of that pastelaia. They ate it up. And so we really enjoy shooting from the hip, using the resources that we have available to us at the time. We sometimes have to go 50, 60 miles to get food. So we go and we try to find what we can to provide those good, nourishing meals. And we can't speak enough of the fellowship. And so the downtime for these police officers, while they're sitting there eating, if they eat right there, the looks on their faces of just being off stage for a little bit and being around people like them, cops helping cops, that means so much to them. And it means so much to us to be able to do it, because so many people always want to help when it comes time to disasters. And they want to be involved. And this just gives our members a way to get down there and to give back and to pay it forward and provide what we need to provide to these guys and gals. But we love getting inventive with the cooking, and we have a good time doing it.
You talked about the equipment that we have. We talked about the large Nascar trailer and how it was made possible by donations of corporate sponsors, and that's really how we respond to these things. Well, you mentioned the cook trailer, but there are some other equipment that we have that we really need to give some recognition to. California Fraternal Order Police had a cook trailer. What do you call it? The Mighty Mouse? I
call it Mighty Mouse.
Yeah, it's packed. It's a small compact trailer. As small as compared to the 53-footer. It's easy to deploy, and it is a full service kitchen that allows us to really pump out a lot of meals and respond rapidly. So thank you to the California State Lodge for giving that asset to the National. It was a part of a state program, and our agreement is it's needed in California. It will be there, but it is literally fed hundreds of thousands of meals since they've donated it to us. In addition to that, Utah has given us the trailer you talked about that we move equipment in and turn it into a dorm when when operational. And then also we have a generator from a large generator from Missouri. Any other assets from? No, Alabama's given us a considerable amount of money. This really is a collection of a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of groups that really want to see it succeed, and could not be prouder of the response that we have. Jason, I know I've always, I go back to Hurricane Katrina, and I've always said that there is definitely a need for us to be able to respond to these events. I know firsthand what it's like to have that help show up, but we also need to recognize something too. When you show up as a volunteer to help people who are struggling, the last thing we need to do is ask them to help us help them. Because they're struggling themselves. So if someone wants to volunteer to be part of a deployment, walk them through the process. Where do they sign up? What's expected? And what can they expect when they show up?
You bet. We've made it pretty easy to get your name on a list to volunteer. And in that list, you go to the FOP website. You go under the Foundation tab. Under the Foundation tab is the Disaster Relief tab, and then it gives you the opportunity to sign up as a volunteer. With that, you become one of the people that are first notified by email that we're going to deploy. And in that email, it tells you where we're going, what are the conditions, and what we expect from you. You're right, Pat. We can't expect the people that we're taking care of to help take care of us. And in light, we can't go and take up all the hotel rooms and the in the community because those are being taken by people that have lost everything. So we live in the exact same conditions that we're going there to help the people that they're having to live in. And quite for most of the time, that means no power. That means no water, running water. And that means that you're going to be sleeping in your cars or on cots in trailers. And we're getting more and more states that are in local lodges that are getting involved with providing those trailers. And so you just have to be self-sufficient. You have to be able to, we'll give you all the food and the water and then the drinks you can eat and drink. But as far as taking care of your personal needs, those you need to be squared away on that. A lot of people, they get there and sometimes they'll say, where's the hotel room? And quite frankly, I have no idea because I never checked. We've slept on the ground in Louisiana during hurricane season. We've slept in the back of trucks and in cars, and we've evolved with every deployment. We learned something new and how to be more efficient with each one. And part of that efficiency is learning to bring trailers like the Utah trailer that we can sleep 4 or 5 guys in. New Jersey brings a trailer that can sleep probably 6 guys. Alabama brings 2 trailers that are usually camper trailers. And in Matthews, Louisiana, during the Thibodeau deployment, we had a lot of volunteers show up with campers. It looked like an RV park before we were done. So everybody's getting the message as to how they need to take care of themselves. And just understand that you're going to work 18-hour days, and it's going to be uncomfortable. It's either going to be hotter than crud, or it's going to be Colorado cold. And that is a whole different level of cold that I don't know that I've ever experienced, 18 below zero. Consistently. So you just have to be prepared to survive in those circumstances. And quite frankly, that's not a big ask because we're cops and our members are cops. And we've been surviving in those conditions our whole careers. So they just need to be prepared to do that.
And if you do show up, and you could expect that you're going to be rewarded by doing so. Just the gratitude of the people that you're helping. Very heartwarming to see how all of this unfolds. So, Rob and Shawn, let me give you some final thoughts. Tell us what it's like to see help show up at a time of a disaster.
Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I can tell you for us, it was, it's kind of like I've already described. You hear about these things, you sit in meetings and you hear all the great stories, but when you make one phone call and brothers and sisters from all over the country are dropping whatever it is they're doing and they're getting on the road to come help you and your members in a time of need, there's nothing like it. And, Pat, we talk a lot about the labor aspect that we do in the FOP. We talk a lot about our legislative efforts, being the voice of law enforcement out in the media. But I got to tell you, sometimes this part of it gets lost in the minutia, and that is the fraternalism, the very heart of what we do. And this is fraternalism at its finest. This is brothers and sisters in need putting out a call saying, hey, can you give us a hand? And we are there as an organization to grab their hands and pull them up. And Jason, said it earlier. You would not think that a meal and just showing up and cooking for folks is that big of a deal. I can tell you that it is, and it was for us, for our officers who were displaced or lost their homes and still had to work. It was even a bigger deal, and I could not be prouder of that aspect of what we do as the Fraternal Order of Police. That fraternalism, taking care of our brothers and sisters and being there. And it meant the world to us. And it's really kind of lit a fire in me about disaster response. And I plan on being a part of it anytime I can when Jason and his crew deploys. It was a very unique experience and one that we'll never forget here in Colorado.
Thank you, Rob. And Shawn?
Yeah, one of the groups I left out earlier was New Jersey. And so for the local guys here in Kentucky, to see somebody that drove 15, 16 hours from New Jersey to come down to Western Kentucky, little bitty town, it's amazing the feeling they get. So much so, and in Kentucky, we've been considering trying to be a part of the DART program and create our own version that we can provide assistance to the national. It really put a fire under that. And so we announced at our state board meeting just a couple of weeks ago that we received a rather large donation, and we'll be purchasing trailers and trucks and remediation gear. And by later this year, the Kentucky FOP will join the national, and we'll be able to deploy in different locations. And that was a big push by our membership, not only because some of our members have deployed before to help the national deploy, but we saw firsthand here in Kentucky the reward of having the national come here. And, we don't have hurricanes. We don't have those things. We don't have a ton of tornadoes. But this one hit us hard, and we saw how everyone from across the nation, and Rob stole my word, it's the fraternal, this side, Fraternal and Fraternal Order of Police that is so great of our organization. Sitting by a campfire when it's really cold in December after cooking 1,000 meals for the day and being able to just talk to the locals and let them decompress by talking to us, it was amazing. And Kentucky's definitely going to be a continued part of that in the future.
Right. And one thing we hinted around it, but we also have a very strong wellness program within the Fraternal Order Police too. And we've integrated them at least on one deployment, and have intentions of expanding that out in future deployments, of having some of our wellness folks there in our chaplaincy program to be part of this deployment as well. So it's constantly evolving, expanding, and becoming better and better. And, it's I always say, I hope you never, ever see our equipment in your neighborhood, in your community, in your agency. But rest one thing for sure, if a disaster finds you, we'll find you as well. So Jason, if a disaster happens, what normally happens? Phone calls are made to talk about the quick real deployment, and then we'll wrap this up.
You bet. You probably aren't going to have the opportunity to notify us that a disaster has happened. Between President Yoes, myself, several key members of my team, when a tornado hits or a hurricane's coming, our phones are ringing and we're getting prepared. In the week that it takes them to talk about a hurricane, I'm gassing equipment up and loading food into freezers just in case we go. But if a disaster strikes your area, the state president will contact the national president. It's usually the other way around, or myself. And like I said, we're usually right on the phone with them, or the national trustee, and just telling them we're here for them. We got your back. And some of the requirements that we have for making the decision to deploy, obviously one is a request and a need, but then what are our logistics and where we need to be set up to best serve our people. So we make those decisions, and then very quickly a decision is made by the national board to support the deployment or to authorize the deployment. Pat takes care of all that, and the text or the phone call comes to me, and I gather 4 or 5 of my ride or die guys that go to every deployment with me. Phil Wise, Ron Bartmeyer, Mark Sechrist, to name a few, but and we start preparations to deploy. We want to be there quickly. We want to be there within just a few hours of the event, and start providing that much needed help. And so if you need our services, the best thing to do is just to reach out and just know that we've already got our eye on it. We stay pretty in tune with it. My phone goes off quite a bit. We do have quite a bit of disasters in this country, but we look forward to going out and making that difference. And Rob put so eloquently the fraternalism side. I'm so proud of this team. I'm so proud to be a part of it. And what it's evolving into is just, I think, far bigger than I imagined at first. And I'm just proud to be part of this team.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today and talk about such an awesome program offered by the National FOP Foundation and our corporate sponsors and our volunteers. Very proud to see the work that is done in support of our members in some of their darkest days. To those members who may be watching, if you'd like to be part of this program, and like to sign up to be part of our volunteer list, please go to our website, www.fop.net. Click on the FOP Foundation link and then DART, and you will have a place to enroll in a volunteer list. And if you're a company or an individual who'd like to support this program, know that that donations help us continue to respond to future events, and your donations are tax deductible. You can access that information from the website as well. So thank you for tuning in to The Blue View, where we talk about the issues that are important for the men and women who are brave enough to suit up and show up in communities all across this country every single day to protect those that we pledge to serve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of The Blue View, hosted by Patrick Yoes, National President of the Fraternal Order of Police. To catch our next episode, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review. To get the latest from the National FOP, make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at GLFOP and on Instagram at FOP National. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.